Hello all, and welcome back to another Reddit video. Thank you guys for tuning in again to some more stories. I'm excited for these cryptid tales that we're about to read. Also in the description is a link to my Discord, my Instagram, and the subscribe button. No more selling out, let's get straight into these stories. Don't think you need to be in the countryside to run into a cryptid. There are monsters in the city too. People always talk about the number of monsters that reside in our country's vast tracts of uninhabitable land, the dense forests, deep caves, and the remote mountaintops, and the danger these creatures present to us. They're right to warn you, especially around the areas of our national parks, but did you ever stop to think about why the vast majority of people that go missing are last seen in some of our largest cities? For every one person that goes missing in the American wilderness, 3 vanish in our cities. Granted, some of these disappearances on both sides can be contributed to murders, accidents, kidnappings, or runaways. But a growing number each year can be contributed to those things that live in the shadows. And it's getting worse, especially in our cities. Ask any homeless person on the street, they'll tell you. 99.99% of the people they tell will write them off as crazy or under the influence, but I promise you they aren't lying. They saw a huge sticky tongue lash onto a woman and pull her into a dumpster? So have I. They saw a little girl lure a man into an alleyway before pulling his arm off and lapping up the puddle of blood? Not crazy. I've seen that too. A living shadow that envelops its victims in a suffocating black slime? I haven't seen that one, but I know a guy who did, and I believe him. These things are all around us, and you'll do well to listen to my story and take heed. This could save your life. A young girl had gone missing. Young, blonde, blue eyes. The kind that gets her face all over the news when they go missing. Her name was Amelia Meager. I'm sure the entire city had her name and face memorized by the time my story started. Seems like it was all they played on the news for a week. About a week after Amelia's disappearance, I was walking home from the bars drunk and cursing myself for not being able to close with the girl I was talking to when a voice called out to me. Normally, I wouldn't have paid any attention. Not too many people you want to hang out with are on the streets after 2 a.m. But this was a woman's voice. Being the horny young guy that I was at the time, I came to a screeching halt and turned in the direction the voice called from. The voice originated from a dark shadow beneath a highway overpass bridge. "Hello?" I called out into the darkness, my eyes straining to pick up in shapes moving around in the inky black. "Can you help me?" The voice called back from somewhere in the darkness. "I think I'm lost." Something about the voice was strange. The cadence was slightly off, like whoever was speaking was reading lines and didn't fully understand what they were saying. It reminded me of students reciting lines in Spanish class back in school. I still couldn't pinpoint where exactly the voice was coming from as it reverberated between the buildings and the overpass above. "Where are you?" I said to the darkness, still standing just outside the shadow of the overpass. "I can't see you." I heard a movement from within the shadow. Not footsteps, but something dragging along the ground. "I'm here," the darkness said, closer now. I fixed my eyes on the source of the voice, and as my eyes adjusted, a figure came into focus. Just faintly through the darkness, I could make out a dirty white sundress. The ethereal glow of the fabric created a stark contrast against the darkness that enveloped her and made her facial features that much harder to see. "I still can't see you." I strained my eyes, squinting into the dark. "Come out into the light." I watched the outline of the sundress move. It seemed to glide through the air, slowly. I heard no footsteps, and I didn't hear the dragging noise either. It came to a stop about 4 feet from its original position, still sequestered well within the shadow, but I could now see a little more. In the dim light, I could see the blonde hair and blue eyes of Amelia Meager. She was bruised and bloody, scabs dotted her face, arms, and legs. A look of crazed terror filled her eyes, like she was trying with all of her willpower to scream, but she couldn't. "Amelia?" I asked, sobering up quickly. "Are you Amelia?" I took a step towards her. "Please help me," Amelia said as she abruptly reached a hand out in my direction. I took a step back this time. Something wasn't right about her. The extending of her hand was too jerky and choreographed, and her mouth, when she spoke, was downright unnatural. Her jaw moved up and down in a chomping motion, but her lips never moved. It was like watching a dubbed-over foreign film. Nothing about the situation felt right at all. But I had to do something. This was Amelia Meager, the girl who had been all over the news for the last 5 days. I recognized her right away. I couldn't just leave her there. I had seen her family on television, crying. I took another step towards her and reached my hand into the shadow to grab onto her extended hand, when suddenly, a car drove by. The headlights illuminated her for half a second just as I was about to grab her. She wasn't standing. Her bare feet hung pointed to the ground, her chipped toenails dragging along the cement. She had fine, barely perceptible threads intricately wrapped around her joints, her knees, wrists, elbows, and shoulders. A few other fine, silky threads were attached on both sides of her jaw and both sides of her head. Her eyes were screaming at me. I've never in my life seen anyone look so helpless. In that half second of light, my eyes followed the thin strands of silk that attached to her joints to their origin on the ceiling the overpass made above us. Barely visible, a giant, hulking spider pressed up against the overpass. Each of his 8 legs manipulated a strand of silk, controlling their marionette below. I took 2 steps back out of the shadow, staring at the massive creature. I watched it twitch its legs, and my eyes darted back down to Amelia as she was dragged back into the darkness under the bridge to be used as bait for the next guy unlucky enough to walk this direction. I left her there and I ran straight home. Amelia Meager was never seen from again. I've seen a lot of weird shit in the city over the years, and stuff like that seems to be happening more and more often. I said all of this to say, don't think you have to be out in the countryside to run into a monster. They are everywhere. Sometimes they even look just like you and me. You probably walk by a few of them every week without knowing. So keep your head on your shoulders and don't do anything stupid, unless you want to spend your last few days being used as bait like Amelia, or maybe even worse. I'm an animal control expert who specializes in cryptids. When cryptid is entering human homes more often than usual, this is a PSA. For years, I was the guy to call if you had a squirrel in your attic. I mean, to a lot of people, I'm still that guy, but over the last 20 years, I've branched out to other, less common infestations. Now, I'm the guy you call if there is a haunted doll rummaging through your attic or a Sasquatch trampling your flower beds. I love my job. The specializations I've acquired have allowed me to travel across the country, meet incredible people, and experience cryptids like few have ever done before. It doesn't hurt that the pay is great, but the stories are even better. I have one short story for you now. It's more of a public service announcement than anything else, really. I've dealt with every sort of infestation from Sasquatches, spray human urine around area of sighting and it will avoid the area, demonic presences. You usually need to bring a priest in, sometimes can be tricked into inhabiting a lesser creature like a frog, and jackalopes. It's just a bunny with some antlers. Put it in a cage and give the poor thing a carrot. But recently, there has been one cryptid that has been growing more and more invasive into human settlements. The hidebehind. Most commonly found in the forests of the northern United States and Canada, the hidebehind is one cryptid that cannot be easily dealt with. In fact, I'm not sure it's even possible for one of these to be bagged and tagged like we normally would with other cryptids. To my knowledge, no hidebehind has ever been killed, maimed, dazed, or even simply removed from a residence. Once it has made claim to an area, whether it be a local forest, a cave, or even, in one particularly bloody case, a Bass Pro Shop, it will defend that area to the death. First documented by the Native Americans, then by lumberjacks in the Pacific Northwest of America, the hidebehind is one of the lesser-known cryptids on the continent, but without a doubt, one of the most dangerous. No one really knows what they look like. As the name suggests, as soon as they are seen, they quickly duck out of view to hide behind anything in the vicinity. In the wild, these would be trees or rocks. In your home, this could be a corner, a kitchen cabinet, a television, or literally anything else, as they can manipulate their body to hide behind an object of any size. In the few accounts of the sightings we have on record, they have been described as everything from a large bear/lion hybrid to a frail and elderly woman with long legs and rashes on her skin. Because of this wide discrepancy in their descriptions, they are believed to be shapeshifters that can change their shape based on what they believe will best get their potential victim to come closer and investigate the sighting. I don't know why the hidebehinds are moving into suburbs. I'd guess destruction of their natural habitat, but it is becoming a real problem. That's why I'm going to share the story with you now. so you know what to do if one shows up in your home. I pulled up to Tim's house around 12 p.m. on a Tuesday. He had called in to tell us there was a demonic entity in his house and we need to remove it ASAP. They always demand ASAP. Tim had nothing going on, but people are so much more demanding than they were 20 years ago. I took a quick look around the house and it was pretty apparent there wasn't any sort of demon in his residence. Not only was there no reaction to the holy water and Ouija board I'd brought with me, but Tim also didn't have any normal symptoms of a demonic haunting. Bad dreams, sleep paralysis, or the witnessing of any telekinetic events. After further questioning, he described what he saw in more detail. Quote, "First, I was sitting right there on the couch watching television when I got the feeling I was being watched. I turned my attention to the screen door, and for just a second, I saw a bear looking in through the screen. But it wasn't a bear, you see. A bear would just keep on staring at me or keep poking at the door. But this thing just ducked out of view as quick as can be, like it was trying to sneak up on me and I had caught it in the act. It bothered me something awful, but I just grabbed my gun, set it on my lap, and kept on watching the TV, and eventually, that feeling, like I was being watched, just kinda melted off. It was all peaches and cream until she showed up a few days later." End quote. The she Tim was referring to was a new human form that the hidebehind was taking. I assume it was because of the lack of reaction to the bear form it had previously shown itself as. Like I said, the hidebehind wants you to look for it, to come nearer, like an anglerfish. It dangles something in front of you in an attempt to bring you closer. It's a lazy hunter. Quote, "I was out in the garage in my workshop and that feeling come over me again. That being watched feeling. I turned around and I'm looking out the garage door and I don't see anything, but then out of nowhere, I see a lady's head and shoulder pop out from the corner of the garage, and the second she sees me eyeing her, she pops right back around the corner where she came from. Well, this time, I went looking around for her. I gave a wide berth around the corner because I lived in New York City for a year in the 70s, so I've seen crazy people and she looked crazy and I didn't want her grabbing me. So I gave a wide berth around that corner and there wasn't no one there. I walked out around the house and I didn't see anyone, not even footprints. Tell me that ain't demonic." End quote. It wasn't demonic. It was a hidebehind, and I told the man as such. I told him living here on the edge of town made him an easy target for it. I told him that there really isn't any way to get rid of them or scare them off. I told him he could try to leave his house for a year at minimum, and maybe, with luck, it would leave on its own. But the best bet would be for him to burn the place down and never come back. He didn't like that answer. Quote, "My family lived in this house for 3 generations. I ain't leaving, and I sure as hell ain't burning nothing down. I'll tell you what I'm gonna do. I'll keep my shotgun on me, and when I get that feeling again, I'll shoot it. Works for bears, and that's the meanest thing around these parts. Don't see why it wouldn't work for this, what'd you call it? Hidebehind." End quote. You can't argue with anyone over the age of 65. People get set in their ways, their beliefs calcify, so instead, I was honest with them. I told him 2 things. The first thing I told him was that eventually he'd get that feeling that he was being watched and he'd get his gun and he'd start looking around for the hidebehind, only he wouldn't find it. That's what happens in all these cases because at that point it found the best hiding spot I can possibly get, the only place you won't be able to lay eyes on it, even if you tried, directly behind you. And at that point, it's too late for you. The second thing I told him was that I'd be back in 2 days and more than likely, he'd be dead. And then I left. 2 days later, I pulled my van up Tim's driveway to find the screen door open and blowing in the wind. I didn't even need to cross the threshold of his house to find him. He was everywhere. On the floor, the ceiling, the walls. The smell was unbelievable. I poured some gasoline on the front porch and lit it with a match. The house was an inferno within 30 seconds. I got in my van and started to pull out of the driveway, and I took one last look at the house and then beyond it, out into the tree line where I saw, just for a split second, a young boy, before he quickly pulled back and disappeared behind a thin little tree. I was hundreds of miles away by lunchtime. I say all of this to tell you, if you ever think you might have a hidebehind in your house or even in the area, leave. Burn the place down if you have to, so new people don't move in. These things are like bears. If they know they can get food someplace, they are just gonna keep coming back. And if you get the feeling you're being watched and you can't figure out why, call your loved ones because it's standing directly behind you. I'm an animal control expert who specializes in cryptids. Part 2, my first cryptid encounter. A few days ago, I posted a PSA on this website about what to do if you encounter a hide behind in your local area. Well, a few hours after that, I checked my inbox and I had about 1 million questions from 250,000 people. What kind of van do you drive? 2003 Dodge Sprinter van with Rat Man spray painted on the side. Will my body wash attract a succubus? No, but they are intensely attracted to frustrated virgins, so you may or may not have a problem there. Can I come along to one of your jobs? Absolutely not. I barely make it out alive myself half the time. But the most common question I received was, how'd you get your start in the business? Now, I'm a busy man, like I said in my last post. Halloween is right around the corner, and this is my peak season. Unless y'all want your toddler wandering up to a house where half of the Halloween decorations ain't actually decorations, well, then you got to let me work. So, in lieu of answering how'd you get your start in the biz to all of y'all individually, I'll post the story of my first job here to nip any further asking of that question in the bud. In the year 2000, I was 22 years old, and just starting out in my life in the biz, as y'all have been putting it. Pulling snakes out of toilets and charging down skunks using a trash can lid as a shield against its spray. I loved the job. Wasn't any different than what I did as a kid growing up in middle Georgia, only now I was getting paid for it. Money wasn't great, but small town living is cheap and it kept a roof over my head and food on the table. Over time, and through word of mouth, my little business grew until I was the premier rat man in Taliaferro County. Granted, the county population was less than 2,000, so business wasn't exactly booming, but hey, I'm proud of it. One day, I'm in my truck, this was before the van, in a Taco Bell drive-thru, and I got a call on my cell. Unknown number. I answer, Taliaferro Ratman. You need something? The voice on the other end was frantic, screaming about something stuck in his mudroom, but wouldn't give specifics. I could tell from the man's accent and his clear discomfort in the idea of an animal being in his house that he was city folk. You know, a real-life Atlanta dandy. Some of those city folk had second homes in the nearby lakes, but I was shocked when he told me that his home was in Union County, nearly 130 miles away. I asked him how he got my number, and he told me he had found one of my business cards on his kitchen table. I told him I would be there in 3 hours and hung up. Now here's the fishy part. I didn't have any business cards. I still don't, but I still get calls. Sometimes people call me saying they found my card on the kitchen table, or in their pocket, or slipped under the windshield wiper of their car. One lady about 10 years ago said she got out of the shower and my phone number was written there, right there, on the fogged up bathroom mirror. The woman straight up thought I was a devil until I got that family of puckwudgies out of her basement. Got them jealous by talking loudly on the phone about how much nicer and more expansive a nearby cave system was than this horrible basement. After that, she thought I could walk on water. Truth is, I don't know what is pushing business my way. I don't know why I was chosen to do the work I do, but that's the fact of the matter, I was chosen for it. Well, anywho, back to my first job. I pulled up the client's house, or I guess the better word for it would be compound. The property was completely surrounded by a 7-foot security fence that contained the main house, a small chicken run, a sauna, and a handful of small windowless buildings that dotted the forest's property. After speaking to the owner via intercom, he remotely opened the gate and greeted me as I pulled up the driveway of the main house. He was a wiry, rat-faced, dead-eyed man who looked and smelled like he hadn't showered in days, maybe weeks. His greasy hair clung to a greasier forehead as he reached his open hand toward me. "Hello, we spoke on the phone. My name is Dave," his accent betraying him as a foreigner in these parts. "Elmer," I replied. "Not from around here, Dave?" "Oh." Dave's face dropped as if he was upset that he had been so easily discovered as an outsider. "Oh no, not from the south. This is a vacation house for the family and I. The winters down here are mild compared to up north. I couldn't believe this guy had a wife smelling like he did. Where's the family?" "I'm down here doing some maintenance just for the week. The whole family won't be down here for another 2 months or so." "Alright, well, what's the problem?" Dave stepped close to me. I mean, really close. Like Eskimo kisses close. And asked me, "You deal with this stuff often, huh? Your card makes it seem so." Thankfully, he took a step back. "Honestly, I'm not even sure where I got this card in the first place." "You, got that card on you, Dave?" "Here." He handed the card over to me. It was a plain white business card with black text that read, "Elmer Ratman Boggs, Animal Control and Cryptid Specialist. His prices are unbelievable. The back of the card had a little picture of a ghost along with my phone number. It's at this point I should tell you, these cards are different every time. I still don't know where they come from and I've stopped caring. Each one has some stupid pun on it. He's got the spirit. Half price on April Ghoul's Day. I've seen one that had a picture of me wearing a French maid's outfit with the words, "Plagued by paranormal titties? Call Elmer," splashed across it. I do not like that one, and I have no idea where that picture came from, so don't ask. "Yeah, I deal with these kinds of things all the time," I said. "Now show me where the critter's at." Dave led me down the hill on which the main house stood and out to one of the smaller buildings that punctuated the tree line. "It's in here," Dave said as we approached a small shed about 10 feet by 10 feet. A large padlock held the door in place. "I thought you said it was in your mud room?" I asked. "Yes, well, I was panicked on the phone, I suppose," Dave explained. "As you can see, we keep chickens here, and when the boys are here, we like to go hunting. This is where we clean and butcher our animals." Good enough explanation for me. "Open it up." Dave opened it up and practically ran back towards the main house as I stepped into the room. It was all white. Painted cinder block walls, fluorescent lights, laminate flooring with a drain in the middle of the room. A large hook hung from the ceiling to hang a deer carcass. There was a countertop with a sink and a few drawers. Probably knives in there, a wall-mounted security camera. I'd like to know more about that, but what really demanded my attention was floating on air in the top corner of the room facing the wall. It was a human head. I couldn't believe it. Nowadays, this is an average Wednesday, but imagine you're in my position. Your neighbor calls you over to help get a raccoon out of the attic, then you get there, and he's all, "Oh wait, never mind, it's a decapitated human head. Oh yeah, and it flies around like a helium balloon." That's right, folks. A floater on my first day. A real trial by fire. I didn't panic. Not sure how, but I didn't. I took a step back slowly, but apparently not slow enough as I watched the head turn to face me. It was a woman's head. Long black hair. Eyes gouged out. Black dried blood caked all over it, and it had a tail. A few inches of spinal column sticking out the bottom. I stepped out of the shed and slammed the door before it did anything else. Dave called to me. I turned to see his smelly ass calling from an upstairs window of the main house. Fucker was just gonna leave me to die out here. "Can you get rid of it?" "Oh yeah, buddy, I can do that." I was talking out of my ass. "But we need to talk." I told Dave I could get it out, but it would be expensive. Very expensive. I also told him I would need time. A few days. I made up some bullshit about rituals and waiting for the correct phase of the moon, but in reality, I had no idea what I was going to do, and I just needed enough time to look around the internet to figure out what the hell I was dealing with and how it should be handled. I told him I'd have to go home and get things ready, but I'd be back in a few days to fix his floating head problem. He made a counteroffer. He'd give me a cash advance right now to go into town and gather all the necessary supplies for the rituals and the cleansings, and I could stay the night on the property so I wouldn't have to drive the 3 hours home. He'd also give an additional bonus if I could have the cursed noggin removed within the next 24 hours. I asked him if he had internet access. He did. I accepted. I could kill 40,000 rats and still not make the money I was going to make the next 24 hours if I could pull this off. I took the extremely generous cash advance and zipped out of compound to buy my supplies. I drove the 40 minutes south to Dahlonega, an old gold mining town, and found an electronics store where I bought a laptop computer and mouse. That's really all I needed, but I couldn't go back empty-handed when I'd promised an elaborate ritual. So I popped into a few of the novelty gold mine stores and bought some fool's gold, a few pretty rocks, a nice hat, that was just for me, and a peacock feather. Then I headed back to the compound. I spent the entire drive back pinching myself, wondering if I had finally lost my marbles, questioning my faith, replaying every single episode of X-Files over and over in my head. I decided it didn't matter if I was crazy or not, either way, it was happening. I got back to the compound, parked the car, brought my newly bought equipment up to the room I would be using on the second floor of the main house, then asked Dave for the key to the shed. I wanted one more look at the head. I slowly opened the shed door and peeked inside. The head was still floating in the top corner of the room facing the wall. I stood for a while, watching it. It slowly bobbed up and down as if floating in water. I watched what little of the neck was left vibrate as gentle moans emanated from it. I cleared my throat. The head slowly turned towards me. Its expression didn't change. It didn't lose any elevation either. It seemingly wasn't interested in me at all. I took a quarter out of my pocket and tossed it up towards the head where it plinked off its cheek and bounced down to the floor below. The head remained neutral. This thing didn't give a shit about me. Might as well have called it my dad. I left the shed, locked the door behind me, and headed up to my room to do some research. This was the hardest part when I started this gig. How do you tell the difference between a gnome and a leprechaun, a fairy and an elf, a wendigo and a skinwalker? What happens if you get it wrong? I'll tell you what happens. You get hurt or you die. 6 years ago, I made the mistake of misidentifying a band of Namerigar as Rocky Mountain Hill dwarves, and I lost 2 fingers and a bite-sized chunk of my ass. I've learned my lesson the hard way. Research, research, research. It's the name of the game. And this was a tough case to start with. Floating heads appear all over Native American folklore, especially in the Iroquois and Wyandot histories, but their heads were different. For one, they had wings and talons. The one I was dealing with just floated. They're also like 6 feet tall, and this one was just your regular-sized, everyday disembodied head that just so happened to take flight. There's also the behavior. The Iroquois version of the head just kind of flew around and terrorized anyone who was unlucky to have stumbled across it, while the Mohawk histories say it's out for revenge against those who gave it an undignified death. But the big problem with oral histories is that they change. One day someone can't remember something, so they throw their own wrinkle in there. It's like a centuries-long game of telephone that started with Jessica has great hair and ends with death metal head eats babies. At least this head didn't seem to mind my company. It wanted whatever was in the direction of that top corner of the shed it was entombed in, and I just couldn't for the life of me figure out what it was. I had a hunch, but nothing solid yet. I looked at the clock and realized it was nearly midnight, opened my door to head to the bathroom to piss and wash my face before bed, and ran directly into Dave, who had seemingly been standing right outside my bedroom door. "Big day tomorrow," he said. "Yes sir, big day. Will you get it done? Does the Pope wear a funny hat?" Amusing. He didn't smile. "I'm fixing to wash my face before bed, and we'll be out there bright and early tomorrow morning." "Will?" Dave didn't seem happy to be included in that last sentence. "Yes, sir. I'll need your help with this ritual," I said back to him. "2-man job." "This isn't what I'm paying you for," he sneered. "Don't worry, you won't have to do nothing, just need you in the room." I was talking out of my ass again. "Nothing too big, just need you holding a peacock feather is all." "Humph." He exhaled from his nose sharply and stared at me with his dead black eyes for a few seconds before marching off. "Good night." I was washing my face in the bathroom and realized I never picked up an extra toothbrush when I was in town. Now, I don't know about where you're from, but people I know always have an extra toothbrush laying around. Especially people with families like Dave said he had, so I did a little light snooping through the drawers in the bathroom, and you know what I found? It wasn't a toothbrush. It was a loose panel on the base of the bathroom counter. I pulled it back and found stuffed inside a hammer in a plastic bag. I opened the plastic bag and dumped the contents into my hand. Driver's licenses. 12 of them, at least. All women. I fingered through them and quickly looking at the pictures, names, and dates when one caught my eye. Misty O'Connor. I recognized her immediately because you never forget the face of the first flying decapitated head you see. You just don't. I don't make the rules. This fucking guy, Dave. My hunch was right. The cameras, the multiple deer cleaning shacks, the 7-foot security wall. To protect you from what, Dave? The extremely high turkey population of Union County? No way, Jose. I knew what I was going to do. The next morning, Dave unlocked the shack and held it shut while I gave him instructions. He was going to stand off to the right side of the shed while I went into the room and tied a blindfold around the head. Once the head was blind, I would signal him to come in and he would place a peacock feather in the head's mouth. Then I told him the head would disintegrate into a fireball and he could pay me the rest of my money. It was all bullshit, of course, but if brains was made of leather, old Davey could hardly saddle a June bug. I took over holding the door from Dave and motioned for him to walk off to the right side of the shed. I felt the pressure on the other side of the door relax as the head floated to the right, following its sense of where Dave was. I entered the shed and found the head floating at chest height, gnashing its teeth at the wall that protected Dave. "Hey, Misty, shh, it's okay," I told the head in the same voice I use for dogs and cats and sometimes lizards. "I'm on your side. We're gonna get this son of a bitch." I looped a piece of cloth around the head, covering the empty sockets where the eyes used to be, and held the 2 loose ends in my hand like a leash. The head pulled gently, as if agreeing to my unspoken plan. My other hand held the piece of fool's gold for literally no reason other than convincing shit-for-brains Dave my plan was totally legit. "Aight now, Davey, come on in," I shouted towards the open door. The head of Misty O'Connor pulled leash gently, following the path Dave took as he walked the perimeter of the building. Dave then appeared in the doorway looking like a total idiot by holding out his peacock feather towards the head like a priest would hold a crucifix towards a vampire. "So all I have to do is put the feather in his mouth?" Dave asked, his voice cracking and clearly terrified. I fake strained and sucked in a few short breaths, pretending to be fighting for my life, holding back this monster. "Just do it already! I can't hold it for much longer!" Dave shrieked as he shoved the peacock feather into Misty's mouth. The head slowly pulled the feather in with its lips and teeth and gave a few over-exaggerated cow-like chews before swallowing. The mangled feather dropped from the open neck at the bottom of the head and landed on the floor with a wet plop. I stopped straining and started to relax. "It's working! It's losing energy!" I shouted at Dave in fake exhilaration. "So that's it?" Dave asked, catching his breath. "We killed this bitch?" The head tugged on its leash a little harder at that last word. "We got her," I said back. "Then I don't need you anymore," Dave said as, in one fluid motion, he pulled a knife out from behind his back and lunged at me. Everything went according to plan. I released the blindfold/leash and Misty was on Dave like a pit bull on a preschooler. First, she bit his knife-wielding hand off at the wrist, then, in a split second of confusion that followed, she bit a sizable chunk out of his neck. Dave collapsed in a bloody heap on the floor, trying to bat his one-time victim with his remaining hand, but she was far too quick for him. By the time he tried to swat her, she was already on the other side of his body, biting off another chunk. Eventually, he stopped fighting, and that's when it got really gruesome. He lay on the floor of his kill room, crying and begging for mercy, like so many women had before, and just like those women, he wouldn't get any. I looked away, but the horrible sound of breaking bone made me look back. Misty's jaw was unhinging, breaking, expanding. Then, like a boa constrictor, she began the tedious process of slowly, almost tenderly, swallowing him whole. She started at the feet, which were easy enough, but around the thighs, she began to flick her chin forward and tilt her back. She started at the feet, which were easy enough, but around the thighs, she began to flick her chin forward and tilt her head back to help the fresh meat go down. Less snake-like and more Komodo dragon-like. Dave screamed the entire time. The last thing to go was one of Dave's outstretched arms, which she greedily slurped up like a noodle. I'm not gonna lie, once she finished, it was awkward. We both just kind of looked at each other for what felt like an eternity. Eventually, I had to break the silence. It just felt too weird, so I said, "Hi, Misty." Then I immediately felt like an idiot for saying something so stupid. What am I, 5? After another few seconds, Misty erupted into a small fireball and completely vanished. Turns out I was actually right about that part. Felt good to be right. I phoned the police and answered their questions when they showed. Told them I was here for an appointment and noticed some weird shit. They searched the property and that was that. They found 2 other girls, one of them was still alive. Of course, they think Dave is on the run, but it at least gave some families some closure. Then I walked back to my truck, upset about not getting paid more than the advance which I had already spent, when I felt that weight in my pocket. I reached in and pulled out an envelope of cash. That's how it works, a lot like the business cards. I have no idea how, it just shows up, and I don't ask questions. I hope this has answered some of your questions. Maybe after Halloween I can answer a few more for y'all, or maybe I could tell you about the 2 years I spent traveling. Either way, I hope you enjoyed my stories, and if you ever need me, you already have my card. A night in the Pennsylvania woods. Ever since this happened to me, this has been my go-to story to retell at campfires. My friend told me it might have something to do with a particular cryptid that's bad luck to mention, so I typed it up for r/cryptids to see what they think. I was proud of my product, so I thought you guys might like to hear it too. Hope you enjoy. Back in 2016, I was working at a summer camp in western Pennsylvania. It was my 3rd summer there and by far my favorite so far. As a high schooler, spending months away from home in the woods was a dream come true, especially given that the months were spent working with kids or veterans, with the occasional interesting school group or corporate group. Most of my work was maintenance, logistics, or facilitation, but occasionally I was put on as a counselor for a team with children. The days were long, but after we finished our duties, we were free to string up our hammocks and sleep anywhere we'd like around the camp, so long as we didn't disturb any groups. It was late in the season, so by this night, myself and 2 buddies were plenty comfortable with the area and decided to sleep at the edge of the furthest cabin loop. We triple stacked our hammocks, one above the other on the same 2 trunks, and started a fire just before the last daylight retreated from the trees. The edge of this loop was quite far away from the headquarters cabin and chow hall, so any light from the night shift lamps died out long before it reached us. The cabin we were by, a bit more dilapidated than the rest of the cabins, was on the outside edge of the trail, which represented the extent of our camp before miles of forest. This section in particular had denser underbrush, the outside edge of the trail being lined by a wall of briars, a couple yards thick and just over head height, almost like a hedge wall. The cabin steps fell out onto the trail, and just across from that was the fire pit. Our triple stack was a few yards from the fire pit, still on the near side of the trail. We stayed up for a few hours and chatted about whatever popped into our high schooler brains. Body counts, the military, music. The campfire slowly died down as we talked, and as the flickering lights pulled back from the cabin and briar wall to slink back into the embers of the pit, we decided to call it a night. We snapped a photo of ourselves in front of our stack and climbed up to sleep. As I laid there waiting to sleep, it occurred to me that the forest wasn't right. There were no nighttime bugs making their usual ambiance. No frogs. Even the rustling of the leaves in the breeze was dampened. And the breeze, it was colder than any night previous and colder than any July night ought to be. The lack of ambiance seeped into me. Every pop from the low glowing embers in the pit echoed amongst the trees and struck my nerves. I strained to hear anything, hoping for the crickets to come back. And then it started. Thup, thup, thup. Out past the briar wall, some kind of noise was heard. Felt, bounding and reverberating across the trunks. Thup, thup, thup. It sounded almost like an axe striking a tree, but too soft on the tail end. And at this time of night, thup, thup, thup. And it's a bit fast for that. Steady, but no one could draw back an axe and strike again that fast. At least not with enough force to make such a solid noise. Thup, thup, thup. It's almost like it was getting louder, and always in an exact set of 3. I opened my hammock and turned my head towards the outer edge of the trail, towards the noise. I could just make out a dim orange light in the woods past the briars. Thup, thup, thup. No, it's not growing louder, it's coming closer. I looked down to my friends and feebly asked if they heard the noise. The fear and their half-whispered yeses struck me through the frozen air. Thup, thup, thup. It couldn't have been more than 10 yards behind the briar wall now, and we all knew it. Without a word, we sprung from the hammocks and started stuffing everything in our day packs as fast as we could. It felt like we were packed in seconds and started running past the fire pit to head down the hill towards main camp. Thup, thup, thup. It was just behind the briar wall now, but we were packed, ready to run, and yet it felt like it was all I could hear. I suddenly felt a pull. I turned back towards the briar and could see a dull orange glow seeping through the twisted limbs of the thicket now. And I just wanted to see. My friends could see my intention. One pleaded with me, "We have to go, now, what are you doing?" I remember replying, "If we don't look now, we'll never know. Just one look and we go." I stepped towards the wall and felt so right. My second friend grabbed my shoulders, and as soon as he touched me, it felt like my head was swimming. Before I could reply or protest, he started pulling me down the path towards Maine. I remember feeling warmer the closer we got to Central Camp. Admittedly, we ran the entire trail back, but it was like the forest thawed. The insect chatter came back first, then the frogs, then the leaves in the wind. The woods regained its usual inviting feel. We slept on the floor of the dining facility. I can't say why I suddenly felt so compelled and so sure that I needed to go past the briar wall and look that night, or what would have happened if my friends didn't stop me. All I know is that we stuck to main camp for the rest of the season, and that when we looked in the morning, the photo we took had 3 dull orange orbs floating across the background.